time of year is upon us, where the pumpkins glow bright into the night, and where scary stories are told around the campfires. Halloween is here. A great time to tell these terrifying stories that all happened during the fall and Halloween season. Now, sit back and feel the chills run down your spine. Happy Halloween. Halloween was a time of year I looked forward to. Where I'm from, it isn't celebrated as much as it is in other parts of the world, but being a fan of horror and the spooky season, I enjoyed it, and I still do in some ways, just not as much as I used to because of what happened to me a few years back on Halloween 2019. What happened still freaks me out today. I'm from a quiet town, and although we didn't usually get too many trick-or-treaters in the area, I was always prepared and brought candy and chocolates for the odd few that we did get that knocked on the door. I like to acknowledge the people that did make the effort to celebrate the occasion and dress up in cool costumes for the night, as it used to be one of my favorite holidays throughout the year. So, a few nights before, I stocked up and got supplies to leave a bowl ready for the night. It was soon Halloween, and that night, as I had no plans on going out myself, I decided to chill out and get a few beers and watch a few of my favorite horror flicks back to back. I remember being halfway through Hellraiser when the doorbell rang. It was 9 p.m., and it was the first set of trick-or-treaters I'd gotten that night. I made my way to the door and grabbed the bowl of candy. As I opened the door, I was greeted by a mini Michael Myers and an awesome-looking scarecrow. I complimented their costumes and gave them both some candy and waved them goodbye as they made their way back down the drive and through the gate. I was soon back to the film, enjoying it as I hadn't seen it in so long. After that had finished, I decided to put on a more modern horror movie with the first Conjuring. And by now it was nearing 11 p.m. when I was settled watching the film and pretty certain I wouldn't be getting any more trick-or-treaters at that time of the night. I paused the film and headed to grab myself another drink and lock up. But as I was in the kitchen, 3 loud knocks echoed down the hallway from the front door. I looked at the time and thought surely it couldn't be more trick-or-treaters. As I made my way to the door, I bypassed the bowl of candy straight to the door. As I opened it, I was met with a tall, hooded figure standing in my doorway wearing a white faceless mask. Just 2 dark sunken holes where their eyes sat. I stood there for a second in silence, thinking to myself this didn't even look like a kid. Maybe a late teen under the mask at a push, but this person definitely was no kid. The silence was soon broken as a deep, quiet voice came from behind the mask as they slowly said, "Trick or treat," in an emotionless way. Still processing the person that stood at my door, I soon tried to lighten the mood as I said, "A little late for trick-or-treating, aren't you?" Throwing a few laughs, trying to lighten the moment as I reached for the bowl of candy. As I turned back, I held out the bowl, offering the guy some candy. But instead of taking some candy, the guy just stood there, motionless, staring at me. I began to feel slightly uneasy as I said, "Here, just take some candy and leave." Again, the guy just stood there, staring at me for what felt like forever. I just about had enough, and not to mention freaked out by this stranger, I pulled the bowl back as I said, "Okay, prank's over now. You can leave, or I'll call the police." This didn't seem to faze him at all, as the guy again continued to just stare at me. As I was about to shout, the guy slowly turned around and walked back off down the drive and into the night. Freaked out by the whole encounter, I shut the door, locking it behind me. Looking outside one more time to make sure they were actually gone, I headed back to the kitchen to grab my drink and finish watching my movie, albeit slightly more creeped out now watching a horror movie and being alone. An hour later, the movie was nearing the end. I felt myself drifting in and out of sleep, trying to stay awake and finish it. As I was about to give in sleep, I was soon jarred awake, shooting up to the sound of 3 loud knocks, banging on the front door. Startled, my heart now racing, I sat up, staring at the front door. It had gone midnight, and I knew this was no trick-or-treater. I raced over to the door and looked through the peephole. There was nobody in sight. I opened the door slowly to get a better view. And there was no one there. The driveway was empty, but my gut knew, and it was telling me it had to be the same guy from an hour prior. I slammed the door shut, locking it again. Freaked out, I made sure all the windows were shut and turned off the TV, getting ready to head upstairs. I grabbed my phone and headed to my room, having had enough of Halloween and the horrors for one night. I looked out my bedroom window to get a better view, to see if I could see anything outside, but no one was there. I thought maybe whoever it was had finally had enough of pranking me and ran off. I locked my bedroom door and lay on my bed, playing on my phone for a bit as I was too freaked out to sleep. After browsing Instagram for a while, I began to drift off again, and before I knew it, I must have been asleep as what happened next scared the living shit out of me. The sound of glass shattering crashed through the house, waking me instantly as adrenaline surged through my body. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find as being a weapon, which ended up being a dumbbell. I stood behind my bedroom door, trying to listen out for any noise or signs of movement downstairs, but there was just silence. I slowly opened my bedroom door and instantly felt the cold air hit me. Heart pumping, I walked to the top of the stairs, looking down, listening for any signs of movement. Slowly making my way down the stairs, I didn't know if I was brave or stupid, but I had to know what had smashed. I reached the bottom and the house seemed empty. As I turned the corner, I saw the shattered glass of my kitchen's back door, which sent shivers down my spine. A brick lay on the floor as I slowly moved in closer. It wasn't until I reached the kitchen door that I could then hear the sound of static coming from my front room. As the door was right next to the kitchen entrance, I slowly pushed open the door to the front room. As it opened, the sound of static grew as the light from my TV lit up the room, and it was then, when I saw it, I froze to the spot. Lying on my coffee table in front of the TV was the faceless mask. Those dark, sunken black eye holes staring back at me. My heart raced as I looked around the room as I clenched the weight in my hand. The room was empty. Moving closer to the mask, I could see a piece of paper next to the mask, and on closer inspection, it read, "Trick or treat." Fear surging through my body, I made a run for my front door, bursting out onto my drive as I called the police. Turning back and looking into my house, fearing someone would follow me out, but no one did. I explained everything to the police, not knowing and fearing that whoever it was still in my house. The operator told me to stay on the line and that officers would be with me shortly. I walked and stood out on my quiet street that night, too afraid to stand at my house. The police arrived pretty soon after I'd called them, and with me in tow, they searched my house, finding no one. Upon leaving, they took the brick, the mask, and the note, hoping to gain some evidence as to who it was that broke into my house. I didn't sleep at all that night, and to be honest, many nights after. Nothing ever came back from the police. They were never able to apprehend a suspect. I don't have any idea who it was that came to my door that night behind the mask, but whoever it was played one fucked up Halloween prank on me, if that's what it even was. Ever since then, I've never stayed alone on Halloween. You get some freaks out there on Halloween, but the fear of not knowing who it was being the worst. I hope I never come across them again. Just for some backstory to fill you in, I'm a 23-year-old female, and my birthday is near Halloween as I'm a fall baby, so I've always enjoyed that time of year, and Halloween had always been one of my favorite times throughout the year. But Halloween 2017 has tainted that for me and always stuck with me as one of the creepiest experiences I've ever had. In my town of Charlotte, Halloween is celebrated by most, and a girl from my college was throwing a huge Halloween house party with her parents being out of town. Myself and my best friend were invited, and we knew about it pretty early in the month, so most of the month we were planning our outfits as, of course, it was fancy dress. We had decided to match outfits and go as characters from one of our favorite horror franchises at the time, The Purge. We had bloodied our dresses and fishnets with light-up neon masks. Probably cliche, but we didn't care. And the outfits turned out great. It was the last Friday before Halloween, and we had ourselves a few drinks and made our way to the party. As soon as we got there, we could see loads of people in amazing costumes and having a great time. We knew that it was going to be a good night. The first thing we did was go and find Sasha, whose party it was, and thank her for the invite before making our way to the kitchen through the crowds and get ourselves some drinks. We had gotten there pretty early, as there was still a lot of people arriving. We obviously saw loads of people from our college. It was hard to recognize faces at first, as, obviously, the majority of the people were either wearing masks or makeup. It was halfway through the night when we had been dancing in the front room. Everyone was drunk by now, including myself. Well, at this point I was tipsy and still aware of what was going on compared to some others. It was then I noticed, out of the corner of my eye, a tall figure standing in the corner of the room and seemingly staring over at me and my friend. I looked over, trying to work out who it was or if we even knew them, but all I could see was the long black cloak and a disturbing pig's mask covering their face. I remember thinking, winner for the creepy costume award. They continued to look over in our direction, motionless, standing alone. I waved over, trying to be nice and thinking they may come over and we could then see who they were, but they didn't move. Instead, they just stared over, not moving an inch. I began to think it was someone we knew just messing around, playing a typical Halloween prank, so bored of them staring over, I gestured to my friend about getting some more drinks. So we decided to take a break and head to the kitchen and fill up on some alcohol. The kitchen was pretty empty, a few guys sitting at the table pretty much passed out drunk. As we grabbed our drinks, my friend tugged on my dress to get my attention. As I looked to see what she wanted, she quickly gestured for me to look over at the entrance to the front room. As I looked over, again, I saw the guy in the pig's mask, standing in the doorway, staring right over to us. Beginning to wonder what this guy's problem was, I decided to stick my middle finger up to them as I smiled, thinking hopefully they'd get the message that their prank wasn't working. But again, they just continued staring. Having downed our drinks, we decided to head to the toilet and get away from whoever this was for a bit and freshen up. Heading upstairs, we locked ourselves in the bathroom and began to discuss the night and pick what we thought the best costumes were at the party. As we were finishing up and talking, we were stopped by 3 slow knocks on the bathroom door. As I opened the door, I was surprised and annoyed to look up and again see the tall figure of the guy in the pig's mask standing in the doorway. Not knowing what his problem was, I point blank asked him what he wanted, with my friend also having her turn telling him to get lost. But he just stood there, motionless, staring at us as we could hear his heavy breaths under the mask. I couldn't place his tall figure and stature of anyone we knew, and having had enough of their games and being quite drunk at the time, I decided to reach out and try to remove his mask to see who he was. But as my hand almost touched the pig's snout, the guy moved his head slightly to the side as he grabbed my arm, gripping with force to the point it hurt. I screamed for him to let go of me as my friend, now concerned, pushed at him, shouting he didn't have the right to grab me like that. As she pushed him, upset, I pulled my arm free and pushed past him, shouting that we were going to find out who he was and get him kicked out of the party. His stupid prank had gone too far and it was all over. As we pushed past him and stormed off, he didn't follow, but just watched as we headed back downstairs, and we shouted we were going to find out who he was. Back downstairs, we joined the room full of drunk partygoers. We saw Sasha with her boyfriend. I asked her who the guy in the pig's mask was as he was creeping us out and physically grabbed me. I explained to her what had happened, and she was shocked to find out what he was doing. But she didn't know who it was and said she thinks he arrived with Colson, a student from our college. Trying to calm me, she said it was probably a stupid prank but she helped us find Coulson so we could find out who it was. To my shock, when we asked Coulson, he didn't know who we were on about. He said he didn't come with anyone dressed in a pig's mask, and to my concern, the more and more people we asked, nobody seemed to know who this guy was. And what freaked me out is when a few of the guys went looking for him, no one could find him. Feeling on edge and wanting to know who and where they were, it wasn't until someone shouted, "The pig man left." I saw him leave out front into the night, as the room then began to cheer. I soon began to relax and feel calm knowing that they had gone, but still wanting to know who the asshole was. It wasn't something that could be fixed by a few more drinks though, so as we relaxed and drank into the night, we enjoyed the rest of our time until we'd drunk what felt like our body weight in alcohol. Our heads spinning at 3 a.m. as the party was dying down, we decided to book an Uber and head back to mine as we were in no state to walk. Thanking Sasha for a great night, we stumbled slowly down the driveway to our ride, looking back to wave goodbye to Sasha, but she'd already gone back inside. It was then something caught the attention of my eye. Looking up at the top window, peering out, I could see the figure of the guy wearing the pig's mask. I turned to tell my friend who was ahead of me, but as we looked back, the window was empty. There was no one there. Laughing at me, my friend said I was too drunk and paranoid that I was just seeing things. Pushing me into the Uber, I looked back up at the window and, in all honesty, I thought there was a chance she was right. And maybe I was too drunk, my head was spinning. With that, I still thought I'd text Sasha and tell her to check the room and look up that night. But as the Uber pulled off, I couldn't focus on typing. All I wanted was my bed. After arriving home shortly after, my friend sleeping over, we threw off our purge outfits and passed out as soon as we hit the pillow. The next day, it was mid-afternoon, and I was awoken erratically as I tried to open my eyes. My friend was already up, rocking me to wake me. As soon as I woke, I saw the tears rolling down her face. I sat up, asking her what was wrong. And what she told me next drained the color from my skin and made me feel physically sick. She told me she had received a call from a friend who was at the party the night before. He lived on that same street and found out that after the party had ended and everyone left, Sasha and her boyfriend were alone and had gone to bed, and whilst they were asleep, they were brutally attacked. Her boyfriend had been beaten to a pulp and tied up to the bottom of the bed, and Sasha, she'd been beaten, physically assaulted in unspeakable ways, and robbed. The scariest thing was, she was found tied to the bed, hands and feet bound with a pig's mask covering her head. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The end of the night flooded back into my mind, of me looking up to the window and seeing the man in the pig's mask. It wasn't just my imagination. I did actually see him, and looking back at my phone, I never got around to sending that text from being too drunk. It was only half written. I felt so guilty, thinking to myself, could I have prevented it from happening? The neighbors had heard their screams for help early the next morning and called the police. That's how they were found. And ever since that Halloween, I have felt like I could have done more and knew to trust my gut. That night we saw the pig man, and with many people questioned from the party, no suspect was ever apprehended. Halloween is supposed to be a fun tradition, but be careful and make sure you know who's behind the mask. Hey everyone, thank you for listening to these chilling encounters. We hope you're enjoying the terrifying content and having a frightful Halloween. You may have seen we recently hit 500 subscribers, and we just want to say a massive thank you to y'all for being a part of the Horror Motives community and our dark corner of the world. If you liked this video, please give it a like, comment a subject you'd like to hear in the future, and share. It really helps the channel and video out. Have a great Halloween, everyone, and remember, fear lies within.